Okay, I guess I can start off by introducing myself as if the people on my channel don't already know me. But hi, everyone, this is the Michael Myers Fanatic. I'm here with a very special guest. I have the actor from the legendary soap opera Guiding Light. It's such a pleasure to have him on, Mr. Robert Newman. Robert, how are you? This is great.
I'm doing fantastic, Darnell. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me on.
This is just so wonderful. I can't believe this is happening. I feel like a child, you know?
That's very sweet.
All of those moments with you and Reva Shayne. Oh my goodness, that Reva, she always made me so angry. That's like that.
Well, me too. Me too, a little bit.
Yeah, you know? So disgusting, the things she did. I said, how did Josh put up with her?
Well, I'm pretty sure her fans would be asking how she put up with me. So I appreciate having somebody on my side every once in a while.
That's right. I'm totally on your side, sir. I'm totally on. I guess my first question would be, how did you become involved with Guiding Light?
Well, I was born and raised in Southern California, in Encino, California, a suburb of Los Angeles, and I was not pursuing any kind of an acting as a kid. I was more involved in sports when I was in high school. But in my second year of college, I had entered college as a psychology major, and I was quite serious about that. I came from a difficult family, to say the least, and I wanted to understand my own family. So I was focused on family dynamics. And in my second year at Cal State University Northridge, I took an acting class just as an elective, just to fill some credits. And I realized pretty quickly that these fields are pretty much the same, that it's about understanding human behavior. And that was my particular focus of interest. And slowly but surely, I shifted my major over to theater and graduated with my degree in 1981. I went from LA to do a season of summer stock at the Barn Theater in Augusta, Michigan, where I still go and work from time to time. And during that summer, I got my equity card, the theater union card. And then I went to New York for what was supposed to just be a few days and met a few people. And an agent asked me if I wanted to audition for a soap opera. And I had never seen a soap opera and I had never acted on camera before. And I said, sure, why not? So I went in and auditioned, and Betty Ray, the casting director at that time, immediately ran me down the hallway to Doug Marlin, the head writer. And I met with Doug, and she handed me an 8-page scene and said, can you come back tomorrow, memorize this, come back tomorrow, and we'll put you on tape. And I said, sure. And so I came back the next day for the screen test. There were 6 other men there testing for the role, including, by the way, side note, Scott Bryce from As the World Turns. And I auditioned and just kind of flew by the seat of my pants. And a few days later, they offered me the role and a contract to move to New York. And I had 8 days to go back to LA, where I hadn't been in 4 months, pack up my life basically, and move to New York City and start working on a soap opera. And Scott Rice was actually cast on World Turns. I think it's Craig Montgomery. I think that's right. Okay. From that audition.
So many people, I'm sorry to interrupt. I just want to point out that so many people have played the character of Craig Montgomery, so I lost track of that.
Yeah.
You know?
I think that's the character that Scott played, and if he did, he would have played it from 1981 on for several years.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you know, you're telling me that you auditioned for this and you got it and everything. Obviously, you deserve it because your performance as Josh Lewis is just legendary. You knocked out of the park. I remember watching you back in 2008 when you were acting with Nicole Forrester. She was playing Cassie, after Laura Wright left. And the way you said it to her when she was going, and I don't like to use this word because you got to be politically correct now. You're not supposed to say crazy, but she was, she was a little unstable.
Yeah.
And you said to her, the way you said it, you said, "No, Cassie, no, you need help."
Oh gosh, well, that was a good reading.
That was great. I mean, and when you said you need help, you went upstairs and you slammed the door. I loved it.
That's sweet. Yeah, You know, it's funny. I know you said you started watching somewhere around 2002. I recently unearthed and posted actually on Facebook my first couple of scenes from October of 1981, and I look at those scenes and I just cringe, and I think, oh my God, I had no idea of what I was doing. I knew how to my way around a stage, but definitely not around a camera. And I was looking at it thinking that's not acting, that's just talking, you know.
Yeah,
And,
just
and then over the years, I felt like I learned from just from some of the really great actors we had on our show. I would go into the studio and watch Bill Rorick or Chris Burnett, who was Alan Spaulding when I came on, and then Larry Gates, who played my father on the soap. He played H.B. Lewis, and I would just watch these guys and really try to understand how they made it work. And eventually, yeah, I guess I got okay at it.
I'm okay. You wait to me.
They kept me around for a while. That's a good thing.
It's like I said. I'm just and I don't mean to cut you off. I'm just in awe.
Oh, that's sweet. That's
So
really nice. Thank you.
please don't be offended because it's not to be disrespectful. You're just talking to someone that is in complete awe of you right
That's
now.
nice.
Because I remember getting home from school, middle school, and watching you, and it's like now I'm grown and I'm talking to the guy that I watched every day at 3 o'clock. You guys used to come on at 3 o'clock, and then you moved to 10 o'clock. But
Right.
that was I just don't know what to say. I'm in complete awe right now. I'm in a lot of soap opera groups on Facebook, and I've told them about this, and they can't wait. They're dying to listen to this. And I guess my next question for you would be, what was going through your mind when you spoke your first line? Like when you uttered your first line as Josh Lewis,
Uh,
tell us, what were you feeling?
well, scared. I mean, of course, and just like I said earlier, just flying by the seat of my pants. I had never acted in front of a camera. The first time I ever acted in front of a camera was my screen test to play Josh Lewis. Other than that, all my work was theater work, and there are different ways of working. You know, things are much bigger in the theater, and they're very small on camera because the real power of the camera is the close up, and you can't be, vocally hitting the back of the house when you're doing a close up. You've got to be soft and you've got to be vulnerable on a lot of things. And I learned a lot of that from watching Chris Burnett, who was always very still when he worked. And I realized later into it that he was being still so the camera guys could really get in tight on him, so that you could see what was happening in his eyes and on his face. My very first scene was with a character that you probably didn't know. The only Lewis that was on the show when I came on was Trish Lewis, played by Rebecca Holland.
Okay, yeah, see, I'm not familiar with that one.
And that was the first two scenes I had, directed by who became my good friend Bruce Berry. And he also directed me, by the way, in the screen test, so that was a nice thing. The first two scenes I had were with Trish in a bar, me walking in with huge hair. I had very long, tall hair back then, and wearing a trench coat, I think. And I remember watching it not long ago, and my voice sounded very high,
Really?
and even more nasally than it does right now, and I just sort of laughed watching it and thought, God, this kid. I mean, all I see is a kid who has no idea of what he's doing. And then I think about how when the show went off the air in 2009, 28 years later, we took a cast picture, and the only person in that cast picture from back when I started was me.
Yeah, that was actually one of the questions, but I guess I'll save that for when we actually get to that question. And my third question is, when did you realize you wanted to be an actor? Like, when did you have that, that moment of clarity, I guess you can call it, when you say, you know what, I want to be an actor. When did that happen for you?
Well, it was kind of, again, it was sort of later in my life. Most of the people I work with now, they started when they were 5 years old, and they always wanted to be an actor, but for me, it just wasn't on the table until I was about 20. And I guess I've never really thought about that. That's an interesting question. Because there was some pivotal moment in college while I was studying that I definitely made that turn. And and in college, I not only studied it in the university, but I also studied outside of school. I entered the Lee Strasberg Institute, which was a pretty high end acting class, for the Lee Strasberg Institute in Los Angeles. And I think it must have been sometime when I was on stage early on. I remember playing Sky Masterson and Guys and Dolls and really loving the whole way of the give and take with a live audience. And, just a couple of these early plays, I think I had a pretty good idea that this was what I wanted to do. The soap took me a while. It did. It took me a long time to adjust to how the soap opera worked. But I the first time people started recognizing me on the street was just surreal. It was, I could barely even understand it, and they would speak to me as if they were speaking to Josh.
Yeah.
I remember a lady yelling at me from across the subway in Manhattan about something about Reva and, mad at me about something.
I mean, that's what I had to do when I told my brother. I couldn't tell him I was going to talk to Robert Newman. He didn't know. I said, hey, I'm going to be meeting Josh,
Yeah.
So, this is great. Like I said, this is surreal because you used that word a minute ago. That's what this is.
That's sweet.
If I'm asleep, don't wake me up. This is great. I guess my next question would be, who was your favorite actor to work with and why?
Well, there's actually three that come to mind, and I don't know that I could separate one into being my favorite. The first obvious one is Kim Zimmer, because Kim and I, we had sort of this, interesting sort of love-hate relationship off camera, but when the camera rolled, we were both fully and utterly committed to the characters that we were playing. And she's such a challenge. She's never it's never not challenging to work with Kim, because she's so inventive in everything that she does, and she thinks through things so specifically. And we still work together on stage from time to time. Our last play together was we did Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf about a year ago, and that was very similar to Josh and Reva, actually. And then the next would be Jordan Clark, who played my brother Billy, because I just loved him with all my heart, and we really had a very real brother-brother relationship off camera. And but the one that I think I learned the most from, and that was really a mentor for me, was Larry Gates, who played H.B. Lewis. He and I had very long conversations, particularly in the last few weeks of his life, when I would go up to Connecticut and sit with him. He was dying of cancer. And we would just talk about life and about acting and about the theater and about, everything. And he, if I think of one true mentor in my life, it would be Larry Gates.
Yeah. Well, I'm definitely sorry that happened with the whole cancer thing.
Yeah.
That's sad. I have to say for 1 second though, let's talk about Kim Zimmer for a second, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
She was just so wonderful on screen. She knew how to push my buttons as a fan.
Yeah.
Like 1 minute I'm sympathizing with her, and then the next minute I'm hating her.
Yeah.
It's like Reva. I just wanted to just choke her and be like, "So, damn it, Reva, stop it!"
Well, just so you know, she could probably beat the crap out of you. So
Probably
she's pretty tough. That one.
Maybe we shouldn't tell her I said that. I don't want her to come and get me.
She really is a force. And she's very unlike almost anyone I've ever worked with before, in the way that she's just such a natural force of nature, and nothing that she does is less than 100%. And she may
it's definitely great.
There were times in rehearsal when she'd be fighting with the director about this line or that story or something, and this stuff sucks and blah 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 blah, and I can't do it, and then you get her up there on that soundstage with the camera rolling, and everything would happen. And even to me, the thing that really separated the great soap opera actors from the good ones were the great ones had an ability to take even the most mundane, mediocre material, because you get some of it. You know, it's a lot of material, and not all of it's going to be good. But you get that mediocre stuff, and you make it fly. And that was really one of Kim's great strengths. She could take a scene that on the page just looked nonsensical, and she would just fly with it. And it was really something to see. And she would bitch about it the whole time, but she would do it.
Right, and she's definitely great, because I'm thinking of something from 1996. I think it was around 96, where she was doing a scene with, I think her name is Cynthia Watros. I guess that's how you
Annie. Yeah.
And she said, the difference between me and you, Annie, is I learned from my mistakes. You just keep making bigger ones. I was like, oh, she got her. Oh, man.
Yeah. That was an interesting story, because, you know, the fans never liked having another woman between Josh and Reva.
I don't know.
They seemed to be fine.
I thought Annie added spice to it, you know?
Yeah, they seemed to be okay with if Reva was with another man.
Mm-hmm.
But if Josh was with another woman, the fans just they just didn't like that. And the Annie story was particularly interesting because Annie often got the upper hand on Reva. You know,
what's wrong with, like, maybe you could make that more clear for me, because I'm a fan, but I don't know, like, exactly what was wrong with Annie. If you could clarify that for the people that don't know, like, was she bipolar? Was she homicidal? Like, what was her problem?
Well, clinically, I've never thought about it. You know, you're talking about being politically correct earlier, and you're right. I mean, I don't want to just say, well, she was flat out crazy, but that's the only way I think of it. I've never thought of trying to diagnose Annie's particular thing, but bipolar is probably close. I'm not sure about that, but maybe. But she and a very low self-esteem kind of thing, where she constantly felt she had to fight for whatever she wanted, including Josh. But I don't know. That's a pretty interesting question. I'd be curious to hear a professional's take on a character like Annie.
Yeah, because when
I think of her as a bad guy, you know, she was a bad guy, you know.
Yeah, I was watching her back in '96, and I felt bad, because she was like, "Will you marry me?" Because she was basically blackmailing you, like, if you don't marry me, I'm gonna kill Reva. And
yeah.
You
have to try to kill Reva.
Feel sorry for somebody like that. It's like, really? You're gonna kill somebody to get your way? I mean, that's not anything to make light of. Like, that's just sad, you know.
Yeah.
Mental illness is a sad thing, you know.
Well, and Cynthia had a way of bringing empathy to that character, you know, in spite of these evil things that she would do. You know, she threw herself down a flight of stairs.
Yeah.
To fake losing a baby.
Yeah, I remember
and
that.
She made it look like Reva threw her down the stairs. I remember that scene. They were at the top, and she grabbed Reva's arms and struggled and screamed, and the whole crowd at the party or something looked up, and what they saw was Reva's hands around, you know, Annie placed Reva's hands around her own neck, struck, and then threw herself backwards down the stairs as if Reva had done it, you know, and that's a pretty despicable and risky thing to do, you know. And I remember shooting that day, and we had a stunt woman in for I think just for Reva, or just for Annie. I think we had a stunt woman for Annie because she had to take that backward fall down the stairs. But I remember seeing it cutting together and thinking, man, that's heavy. That's some crazy stuff right there.
I remember watching that, and now all these years later, I'm actually talking about it. See, this is what makes it so surreal, because I'm actually talking about something that I watched all those years ago. I remember that storyline.
Yeah.
So my next question is, were there any storylines that made you uncomfortable? And if so, what were they? Like, was there a time where you were like, okay, I'm not doing this?
No, I never refused to do anything. I mean, and to be fair, they never asked me to do any, like crazy, like frontal nudity or something like that. I never, in fact, for me, it was more the other way around, where if I talked to the head writers, the thing I would talk to them about the most was to challenge me and to not put Josh in the box of just being a good guy. I wanted Josh to make bad decisions sometimes and do the wrong thing sometimes. And story and the idea of something challenging me, or to me, the hardest time I would have on the show was when I didn't have a good storyline to play, and was just sort of what we called back burner, where you'd sort of show up at the wedding or the Bower barbecue or something like that. You'd have 2 or 3 lines of dialogue, but you really weren't in the middle of something strong. I would say one of the most difficult storylines, and I've said this before, the clone storyline was very difficult.
Oh my goodness! You mean when Reva was cloned?
Yeah, because it was.
I love that.
It was very unpopular in the studio. The other actors wanted nothing to do with it, and so that was a difficult thing to deal with, because you didn't feel like supported by your own cast. Not that they were necessary to the story, but the clone storyline, and they also were angry about it because the day would be longer when the clone was on, because we would have to shoot a bunch of scenes with Kim playing Reva and a body double playing the clone, and then we'd shoot all those scenes, and then they'd go to another set and shoot something else, and then come back to the same set and reshoot all of the scenes they had shot earlier, but this time with Kim playing the clone and the body double playing Reva. So every time the clone was on, those scenes, if there were 6 scenes that day, they would all be shot twice, so the day got longer.
I love the clone.
Wanted to be after the cloning scenes,
Yeah,
they're late, and then the fans. It's funny because the fans now talk about liking that story, but then we were bombarded with negativity about that story, and we lost some people on that story. The ratings shifted on that story. It just. And the funny thing to me, we would get letters, from the Bible Belt, who were so livid about the idea of human cloning, and I found that funny because I would think, isn't it really the rapid growth formula that makes this story crazy? Because remember, they like grew Reva from birth to 40 in like 6 weeks or something.
Yeah, that's
that
true.
to me was the crazy part of the story. The human cloning thing was just a soap opera, exploring some thing. But the idea of the rapid growth thing really made it crazy. But
it's so funny that you're mentioning all these storylines, because I remember all of them, with the exception of you mentioning, I think you mentioned H.B. Lewis. I don't really remember much about him, but it's almost as if you and I are connecting in some sort of supernatural way, because it's almost like you can read my mind, because each one that you're mentioning, I'm thinking of.
Yeah.
So that's actually amazing. My next question would be, other than Reva, is there anyone that you would have wanted Josh to be with?
Well, one of the relationships that Josh had before your time, that people still mention to me, is Josh and Harley.
Oh,
and
yeah.
So
see, that's what I'm saying.
After Reva, when Kim left the show for the first time, they had a story where she had a major incident with postpartum depression, and she thought she was being chased and followed and this and that. And we had this very famous scene where Reva drove her car off a bridge, and Josh dove in the water after her and couldn't find her, and Reva was dead. And at the time, Harley was the nanny for Mara and Shane, who were just little babies. I think Mara was like 6 or 7, and Shane was like 3. And they did a story right after that was very short, because I was also leaving the show about 6 weeks later. But they wrote this very beautiful, sweet story of Harley sort of coaxing Josh out of his extreme loss and depression and sadness and grieving, and they, you know, sort of got together, you know, through that process, and
So
and then I left the show abruptly. You know?
Yeah, why did you do that?
Josh got on a plane and left, and people still say to me, "Boy, that Josh Harley story was so great." And I think, you know, that was only like, I think maybe 4 weeks or 6 weeks at the most. It just wasn't a very long story, but people liked it a lot. You know, I really liked all the women that I worked with on that show, and they all, you know, brought different things to the table. They're all wonderfully gifted actors. I think another difficult one for me was the Josh Cassie story, because it was not difficult for me, but I know it was difficult for the fans. And that was the first time I felt like at fan club gatherings or appearances, there were people who were angry at me, Robert, because of the Josh Cassie story, and that was a little hard for me to process.
Mm-hmm. Why did you leave like, I noticed that when I was reading it on Wikipedia and things like that, there were a couple of you guys that would leave the show and then come back and then leave and then come back. Why was that?
Well, you do get a little burned out, but I left twice for 2-year periods. The first time was right after the end of my 3-year contract, and I just thought, well, I signed a 3-year contract. It's up. I'm leaving. And they asked me to stay, and I was like, no, because I wanted to get back home to Los Angeles, where, you know, my extended family was, and where I was born and raised, and everything else, and also explore other possibilities of work. And so I left, and I came back 2 years later. 4 years after that, in 1990, I chose to leave again, and I don't want to get into that. That was for more personal kind of. I just needed to go. I needed a break, and it was very clear to me that I needed to step away. And but in both of those interims, the first time I left, I met Britt, who became my wife and has been my wife still today for 33 years. And we got married while I was away on that first time from Guiding Light. And then our son was born in New York a couple of years later. And then when we were back in LA, when I left the second time, our daughter was born. But by then we were talking about where we wanted to raise our kids. And we both agreed that we didn't want to raise them in Los Angeles, because I had LA soaps that were kind of interested in signing me on and having me go onto their shows. Guiding Light was calling me and saying, hey, we'd love to have you back. And we just thought, no, let's raise them on the East Coast. And we raised them in this beautiful town of North Salem, New York, which is about an hour north of Manhattan, a very rural kind of place, very small town. And I think it was the right choice. I really do. They've grown up to be wonderful children, wonderful adults, I should say.
That's great. You know, I wish I lived I would love to go to Los Angeles. You know, why do we keep talking about leaving Los Angeles? I want to go to Los Angeles.
Well, and I appreciate that, and I have no problem with that. But, you know, and still today, people ask me about going on to one of the 4 remaining soaps, and my answer is, they're all shot in Los Angeles, and I don't want to live in Los Angeles. I just don't. But that's a personal thing for me. It's different for you. It's different for other people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Laura Wright, when she left the show, it was to go out to LA with her kids and her husband and start work on General Hospital. And part of that was wanting to live on the West Coast instead of the East Coast. That's fine with me. But I feel like this is my home. You know, the East Coast is my home.
I'm glad that the East Coast is your home, because now I can tell all my fans, hey, Robert Newman lives on the East Coast.
I do.
That's great. My next question is, what's your favorite soap opera? Do you have one?
I never watched a soap opera.
That's ironic, I guess.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Well, the fact is, and I know fans don't like hearing this, but I never watched Guiding Light.
Wow.
I would see scenes that I was concerned about. You know, I might look for a scene that we had shot that I wasn't sure about or something. I think the only full episode of Guiding Light I ever watched was not a real episode. It was the full episode when we were in New Orleans working on houses with hands-on.
I remember that. Yeah.
That's the only full episode from start to finish I ever watched of Guiding Light. let me actually change that, because I did see the full episode before your time of Josh and Reva's first wedding, with Reva in the beautiful white dress and coming across the lake, and I did see that entire episode, and it was a beautiful episode.
How many weddings do you think they had over the years?
Well, I know I had 9.
Wow.
Yeah, to 5 different women. I married Sunny twice, Annie twice, Olivia once,
Wow.
Cassie once, and then Reva 3 times.
And then I'm wondering, how does a person love somebody that many times? Like, how do you, like, how is it possible? How can you love Reva 3 different times? I don't
I
know.
don't think he ever didn't love Reva. I don't think there was ever a time when he didn't love Reva. I just think there were times when they just couldn't be in the same room together.
Now, I don't have this written down, but I want to ask you anyway, what was it like working with Tom Pelphrey? Because this guy literally had me laughing my ass off. He was just so sick and twisted and demented when he first got there as Jonathan Randall, and
Yeah,
you were about to choke him or something. I thought
yeah, it was.
that was
Yeah,
great.
you know, one of the really lovely things about being an older, longtime actor on a soap is you do get to see young actors come up, and a lot of them just kind of come in, they do their thing, they're fine, they do their job well, they're skilled, whatever. But every once in a while, you get one that makes you just go, wow, I was not that good when I was that age. you know and Tom really falls into that. I adore Tom Pelphrey, and I think he's one of the finest actors I've ever known,
He's
and he's
one
just
of
such
me.
a natural quality about him, and likability, and he really came in there with both guns blazing, and he was doing a great job from the day he walked in the door.
Yeah, he was just so twisted. I'm like, what? I was like, what is this guy's problem? No wonder Josh wants to choke him.
Well, and Tom himself had a very funny, twisted sense of humor. Tommy was never a bad guy in real life. He's a wonderful guy, but he did have a very twisted way of looking at the world, and a really infectious laugh. He had a great big gut laugh that I've always loved.
I've seen it.
Yeah, yeah, and he's a sweetheart, and I like watching him sort of move forward in his career over the years. He's continued to do great work.
Oh my goodness, I just think he's so great. And like I told you before we recorded this, there are so many of you that I want to get on here, and he's one of them.
Well, yeah, well, track him down. I'm sure he'd be happy to do it.
Because that guy is just, I don't even know how to describe him. He was just so evil as Jonathan Randall.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
I guess my next question would be, do you think there's any way that Guiding Light can come back?
No, I hate to be so flat about that, but the key is Procter and Gamble, and they own the rights, and people have tried to go after them for the rights, and they just won't release it. And I don't know why they won't release it. Time has gone by. Why not? Let somebody else have a swing at it. But I don't think there will be any new soap on a network in the same format that we saw Guiding Light, or see these last remaining 4 soaps. I think that there can be place for a soap opera now on as a web series. I also shoot on Venice, the series, which is Crystal Chappell's web series, and that's a soap opera through and through. But it's also only 12 episodes. But the idea of 250 episodes a year, with a cast of 25 principals, I just don't think that economically there will be any producer out there that will want to take that on. We thought they tried to shift Guiding Light over to something like a cable, like TV Land or something like that, but a deal couldn't be struck then, because back in those days, nobody knew really how to make money off of a series that was primarily shown on the web. Now, starting with House of Cards, I think people have figured out where the money is. And I mean, I suppose maybe something like Netflix could pick up something like Guiding Light and resurrect it if they wanted to. But I, and maybe if there was a real concentrated effort by the fans to reach out to one of these bigger, because it's got to be a lot of money. You know, it's not a low money thing. It's a lot of money. And I'm not talking about me making a big salary. I'm talking about there's so many people involved and so many writers and so many directors and so many, you know, there's just so much stuff involved in shooting that amount of material. And that's why the format itself doesn't really work anymore. So I don't have a crystal ball, but my best guess answer is no. I just don't see that happening. There could be, I suppose, there could be if somebody wanted to try to do like a reunion thing. You know, there could be like a 12 episode Netflix-ish kind of reunion thing, maybe, but never in the format that it used to be in.
That truly saddens me as a fan. It really does.
Yeah, well, me too. I mean, you know, this last season we shot of Venice the series, season 6. They actually wrote in a role for Kim and for Kim Zimmer, and the two of us in that short series actually have a similar. We're playing completely different characters, meeting for the first time, and we have a flirty, funny relationship with each other. And by the end of it, we share a kiss, you know, and it was really nice to be working with Kim in that way, because we have this. We do have a chemistry together. There's just no way around that, you know, and we do trust each other a lot on camera when we're working, and we have a lot of fun with each other. And it made me think, boy, this would be nice to do as Josh and Reva again. But yeah, I unless there's some kind of a, you know, a 6-episode something or whatever, I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, if I were like a billionaire, I would do my best to resurrect Guiding Light.
Well, maybe someday that'll happen. Maybe
it could. You never know.
Yeah.
If you were offered a leading role in a movie, who would you want to be the leading lady? Like, who would you want to play opposite of you?
Well, I did read for a film recently where I would have played Nicole Kidman's husband.
Oh, wow.
That would work for me. There's a lot of I don't know whether to call them actresses or female actors anymore. Speaking of the politically correct thing, I think they call them. I think it's actors now, but whatever. There's a lot of women that I see on the screen and on television that I just think are just so fantastic. And you know, I would be honored to work with any number of men and women in film and in nighttime television. One of my favorite things, we didn't really work together much, but hang on, I got to get this memory in my head. I was shooting on Law and Order SVU, playing this very strange character who was related to these several different icons, you know, of the past. And hold on, because I'm losing a name here. Hang on, just give me 1 second.
It's okay. I'm just in awe to be.
So one of my crazy ex-girlfriends in that was Anne Margaret, and from when I was a kid, you know, from the film Bye Bye Birdie and several other things. And we sat together while I was getting this crazy prosthetic makeup put on my face for about an hour in the makeup room and just chatted about old movies and about theater and about all kinds of things. And that was great. One of my favorite other moments on television was shooting on Homeland. And at one point there was a blackout in the studio for about an hour. And Mandy Patinkin and I sat down and we just talked for an hour. And I had seen him originally on Broadway, you know, in musicals, in Evita. He completely blew my socks off, and I told him he was actually instrumental in my desire to work on stage more, because I loved watching what he did so much. And and he was really gracious and lovely. And I love, that's part of what I love about the business, is every once in a while you're just talking to somebody that's, I met Robert De Niro not long ago. I was doing an off-Broadway play with his daughter, Drina De Niro, and he came to see the play, and we met backstage and talked for a few minutes, and very sweet, very, very gracious and complimentary about my work. And, when Robert De Niro is saying nice things about your work, you don't know if it's bullshit or not, but it feels good.
Wait, hold on a second. You met Robert De Niro?
Yeah, sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, did he do that? Did he do those Robert De Niro-isms? Like, are you talking to me?
Well, he's extremely introverted, and he's not as tall as you think. He's not very tall, and he's very slight, and it's hard to look at him in real life, and he can barely even look you in the eye. His head is down a lot, and he's talking. He's very sweet, but he can barely even look at you. And it's hard to believe that he plays all these amazing gangsters on film, and because he's just not that guy.
Wow.
Very sweet guy.
That's amazing. I guess my final question would be, where do you think Josh and Reva would be today?
Probably on the way to their 5th marriage.
Oh, not again, please, not again.
So after they drove off at the lighthouse in the old truck with, for some bizarre reason, Jeffrey's kid. I never understood that, but whatever. I'm guessing they got married again at some point, and probably now it's been 10 years. So in the cycle of Josh and Reva's life, they would have at least been divorced from each other since then. And about this time, they'd probably back on the way to another marriage to each other, but they would have been married to other people in between.
That's ridiculous to be married. I don't understand how somebody could marry somebody all those times. Come on.
Yeah. So it's sort of like Richard Burton and Elizabeth Taylor. I think they were married several times together. So I think it's kind of like that. And I've always been curious to think about that when we getting back to the idea of some kind of resurrection of the soap of Guiding Light. I'd be curious to see how a writer would approach these relationships today, and how would you fill in the blanks of those 10 years since we last saw this couple, and where would they be, and would they be together, or would they be with other people, or it'd be very interesting. I think I was going to say that. I think it would be very interesting because nowadays, like I said, this is a whole new era. You have to be politically correct, but at the same time, things are darker now, and you've got all this true crime stuff, and so I think if you were to resurrect Guiding Light, maybe Annie would be the subject of a true crime documentary or something like that. Yeah, that's a nice idea. I like that.
You never know. I guess before we wrap this up, though, my aunt Melissa, she wanted you to give her a shout out. She says, "Could you please tell them to give a shout out to Aunt Melissa?"
Aunt Melissa, thank you so much for watching the show all those years. You and your nephew helped put my children through college.
That's good to know.
Thank you very much for that. Without you guys watching the show, without fans watching the show, we would have had no reason to do a show. So I had 28 years of employment out of that, and I am forever thankful for it. So thank you for being a part of that.
And Robert, thank you so much for being a part of my YouTube channel. I wanted to get a soap opera actor or actress so badly, and I'm glad it could be you. That was one of my goals, to get a soap opera actor on here. One of my next goals is to get Jamie Lee Curtis from
I had a crush on her when I was younger.
Yeah, so did I,
Yeah, what's that crazy film she did with Schwarzenegger where she was the
True Lies.
True Lies. I love her in that film. When you talk to her, tell her how much I loved her in that film.
I tried to tell her that. I have to say thank you so much for being on here.
All right. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you. All right, everyone. Well, you heard the interview. That was the actor, Robert Newman from the legendary soap opera Guiding Light. He plays Josh Lewis, and I want to thank Mr. Newman for being on the channel here today. And now that I'm done with Guiding Light, I think it's time that I head back to Haddonfield and see what Michael Myers is up to. So guys, thank you so much for tuning into this interview. I'm the Michael Myers fanatic, and I've had Robert Newman on here, and thank you so much for watching this interview. I approve this message. Thank you.